Alright, we'll be looking at how to write linear equations. In this particular case, we're going to be looking at writing equations, linear equations, given a slope and a y-intercept. Now, when we write these equations, we'll be writing them in both the slope-intercept form and the standard form. I'm going to go ahead and start with the slope-intercept form. Now, in our first example, we're given a slope of 3 and a y-intercept of 5. And what I want to do is write an equation in slope-intercept form. First of all, slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b, where m stands for slope and b stands for y-intercept. Now again, in this example, they've given us both the m and the b. They told us that the m was 3, so I'm going to replace m with a 3. They've also given me b, the y-intercept, that's positive 5. So all I'm going to do is add a 5 to the end. I now have my equation in slope-intercept form. So y equals 3x plus 5 is our linear equation that has a slope of 3 and a y-intercept of 5. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take that equation and we're going to convert it into the standard form. Now standard form was ax plus by equals c. So this is what I want the equation to look like when I get done. So what I'm going to do is take that equation, y equals 3x plus 5, and I'm going to convert it into our standard form. And in order to do that, the first thing I'm going to need to do is move my 3x to the left of the equation. So I'm going to do that by subtracting. So when I subtract the 3x, I end up with a negative 3x plus y equals 5. So once again, all I did was subtract 3x from both sides, and I now have negative 3x plus y equals 5. However, we did have a rule that says we cannot have the value of a be a negative number. So I can't have a negative 3. I can have a positive 3, but not a negative 3. So what I'm going to do to fix that negative 3 is I'm going to take the whole equation, and I'm simply going to multiply that equation by a negative 1. So when I multiply each of these parts by negative 1, or each of the terms, I now have, instead of a negative 3x, a positive 3x. Instead of having a positive y, I now have a negative y. And when I multiply negative 1 times 5, I end up with a negative 5. So notice I have x and y on the same side of the equation. I also have no fractions. I also have a positive value in front of the x. Therefore, I meet all the requirements of a standard form. So this right here is our standard form given the slope 3 and the y-intercept 5. So again, this is our standard form. This one is our slope-intercept form. Next example, we have a slope of negative 2 and a y-intercept of 6. So we're going to repeat the process. We're going to start with the slope-intercept form. Slope-intercept form again is y equals mx plus b. They've given me both the slope and the y-intercept. So all I'm doing is replacing the letter m and b with the two numbers that were given. They told me that the slope was negative 2, so I'm going to replace m with a negative 2. They also told me that the y-intercept was a positive 6, so I'm going to replace b with a positive 6. I now have my slope-intercept form. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that equation and I'm going to convert it into our standard form. And that standard form is ax plus by equals c. So let's go ahead and take the equation and let's convert it to standard form. We're going to start off by moving the 2x to the left of the equation. Now since that's a negative 2x, to move it to the other side, I've got to add it. So this now becomes a positive 2x plus the y equals 6. Now notice my standard form. Notice the x and the y are on the same side of the equation. Notice there are no fractions in my equation. And notice that the value in front of x is a positive number. Therefore, I meet all my requirements for standard form. I don't need to do anything else. This is it. This is my equation in standard form, given a slope of negative 2 and a y-intercept of positive 6. Next example we have a slope of 1/2 and a y-intercept of positive 8. So just like we did in the previous two examples, all we're going to do to start with is replace the letter M, the slope, with 1/2. And we're going to replace the letter B, which is y-intercept, with an 8. I now have my equation in slope-intercept form. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to convert that equation into our standard form. That's that ax plus by equals c. So let's go ahead and take the equation and let's convert it into standard form. Let's start by moving the 1/2 x to the left of the equation. We're going to do that by subtracting it. So when I subtract it, that 1/2 x now becomes a negative 1/2 x. Still got my positive y, and I still have my 8. Now, a couple of things wrong with the equation. First thing we have wrong is there's a fraction in the equation. The other thing wrong with this is that we have a negative in front of the x. We have a negative a value. We can't have these two things. Can't have fractions, and we can't have a negative a value. So we're going to fix both of those problems in one step. What we're going to do is we're going to take this equation and we're going to multiply it by a negative 2. Now the reason I'm multiplying by a negative number is because when I multiply a negative with another negative, it's going to turn into a positive. And the reason I chose 2 is so that I can get rid of my fraction 1/2. So watch what happens when I multiply a negative 2 times a negative 1/2. A negative 2 times a negative 1/2 now becomes a positive 1. So no more fraction, no more negative. I took care of both problems by multiplying by that negative 2. But I got to make sure I multiply everything else by negative 2 as well. So when I multiply negative 2 times my y, I get a negative 2y. And when I multiply my negative 2 times the 8, I get a negative 16. So notice there is no more fraction in the equation, and I no longer have a negative in front of my x. Therefore, I have completed and now have the standard form of our linear equation given that slope of 1/2 and the y-intercept of 8. Alright, last example we're going to look at here. We have a slope of negative 1/3 and a y-intercept of 9. So let's start with our slope-intercept form. We're going to replace the letter m with a negative 1/3 because that's what our slope is. We're going to replace the letter b with a positive 9. This right here is now our slope-intercept form. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take that equation and we're going to convert it into our standard form. That's that ax plus by equals c. So let's go ahead and get started. First thing we're going to need to do is move our x to the left of the equation. So when I move that negative 1/3 x to the left, we're doing that by adding. So this is now going to become a positive 1/3 x. Still going to have the y, and it's still going to equal to 9. Now notice that equation. That equation, we can't leave it like that, and that's because there's a fraction in the equation, and we're not allowed to have fractions in our equation. So what we're going to do to fix that is we're going to take this equation and we're going to multiply it by a 3. Now why 3? Well, because when we multiply 3 times 1/3, 3 times 1/3 turns out to be a 1x. We get rid of the fraction. If you haven't noticed it yet, guys, notice all I'm doing is taking whatever that denominator is, and that's what I'm multiplying by. So if I had a 1/4 x, then I would have multiplied by a 4. Okay. So let's go ahead and continue multiplying by 3. If I multiply 3 times the y, I get a 3y. And if I multiply 3 times the 9, 3 times the 9 gives us a 27. So notice there is no fraction in this equation. I have a positive a value. Therefore, it meets all my requirements for standard form. So I am now done. This is my equation in standard form given a slope of negative 1/3 and a y-intercept of 9.